Imagine your entire nation reduced to ashes, no homes, no hope, no future. Yet within a decade, it rises stronger than ever. In 1945, the world stood on the edge of exhaustion. The thunder of war had finally faded, leaving behind silence filled with smoke, sorrow, and shattered dreams. Germany lay in ruins, its cities turned into graveyards of brick and steel, its people burdened by hunger, guilt, and despair. Every street told a story of destruction. Every face carried the weight of survival. It was a nation stripped of pride, purpose, and hope. Yet, within that darkness, a quiet determination began to flicker. The human instinct to rebuild, to recover, to rise again from the ashes. The Allies had divided Germany into 4 zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. Each one reflected a different vision of the future. The West sought democracy and renewal. The East, control and ideology. But in the Western zone, something powerful began to stir. The United States, rather than choosing punishment, chose partnership. It was a revolutionary act of compassion and foresight. America understood that the only way to prevent another war was not through vengeance, but through vision. A vision of rebuilding nations, economies, and trust. The Marshall Plan became the cornerstone of that vision. Billions of dollars in aid began flowing into Europe, not as charity, but as investment. Investment in stability, peace, and shared prosperity. Germany, though defeated, was not abandoned. Under the watchful eye of American guidance, factories that once produced weapons began producing tools, cars, and machinery. Roads and bridges were rebuilt. Trade began to flow again. But the most important reconstruction was not physical, it was psychological. For the first time in years, the German people began to believe that they had a future worth fighting for. A future built on effort, not conquest. Konrad Adenauer, a man of quiet strength, stepped forward to lead the new West Germany. He understood that the foundation of any true nation is moral renewal. With American support, he began to build not just an economy, but a new identity. One grounded in democracy, discipline, and dignity. It wasn't easy. There was skepticism, fear, and resentment. But there was also hope, and hope is a powerful fuel for transformation. Meanwhile, across the ocean, America was rebuilding itself in a different way. Millions of soldiers were returning home from the war, each carrying invisible scars and unspoken dreams. The GI Bill became their bridge to a new life, offering education, housing, and opportunity. A new middle class began to rise, powered by ambition and possibility. Factories that once produced tanks and aircraft now produced cars and refrigerators. The suburbs expanded, families grew, and the American dream took on new meaning. This post-war reconstruction wasn't just about materials, it was about mindset. America proved that the end of war could also be the beginning of growth. As the 1950s approached, something extraordinary happened. West Germany, the same land that had been bombed into dust, began to surge ahead. Its economy flourished. Its industries became world-class. The term Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, became the symbol of a nation reborn. Behind it stood the discipline of its workers, the courage of its leaders, and the support of American partnership. Together they transformed despair into development, destruction into determination. This transformation was not without challenges. The scars of the past still lingered, and the division between East and West Germany deepened as the Cold War began. Yet even in this tension, the progress of Reconstruction shone like a beacon to the world. It proved that democracy and economic freedom could outbuild tyranny and control. It showed that generosity, not punishment, creates stronger allies. The story. of post-war Germany and American Reconstruction is not just a story of governments or treaties, it is a story of human resilience. It is about the power of belief that even after unimaginable siege, when the final bombs fell and the guns grew silent, the world exhaled, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. Germany was unrecognizable. Cities that once symbolized progress and power were now graveyards of dust and stone. Families wandered through ruins, searching for loved ones, for food, for any sign of a life that once was. The spirit of a nation had been crushed under the weight of its past. Yet, amid that devastation, the human will began to stir, faint, but unstoppable. The war had taken everything material, but it could not destroy the innate human desire to rebuild, to rise, to start again. The American forces who entered Germany saw this destruction up close. What they witnessed wasn't just a defeated enemy. They saw a humanitarian crisis unlike anything they had ever faced. Millions were homeless, orphans filled the streets, and hunger haunted every home. America knew that the way they responded now would define the future of the entire world. They could choose revenge, or they could choose responsibility. The United States chose the latter, guided by a belief that rebuilding the defeated was the only true path to lasting peace. Through the Marshall Plan, America extended a hand not of conquest, but of compassion. This was not a mere transfer of money. It was a transfer of trust. The plan injected energy into a dying continent, restoring factories, rebuilding infrastructure, and reigniting hope. For Germany, this was the lifeline it needed. The old world of empire and domination was gone. In its place, a new society had to be born, one that valued hard work, freedom, and cooperation. The seeds of democracy were planted in soil once scorched by dictatorship. At the same time, the American government knew that reconstruction abroad had to be mirrored by renewal at home. Millions of veterans returned from battle, carrying memories of war and dreams of a peaceful future. The GI Bill became the cornerstone of America's internal reconstruction, offering education, housing, and opportunities that built the foundation for an era of unprecedented growth. Universities filled with returning soldiers eager to learn, new families settled in growing suburbs, and industries expanded to meet the demands of a modern world. America became not just a global power, but a model for rebuilding through opportunity. Back in Europe, Germany's recovery became the defining example of transformation. Under Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, a new direction was taken, one rooted in democracy, economic discipline, and moral renewal. The German people worked tirelessly, often with limited resources, driven by a collective determination to restore dignity and stability. The partnership between America and West Germany deepened, not through dominance, but through cooperation. Factories began to hum again, trade routes reopened, and innovation replaced despair. The result was an economic rebirth so astonishing that it was called the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. This miracle wasn't magic. It was built on trust, perseverance, and the refusal to give up. Germany learned that the true wealth of a nation lies in its people, in their willingness to adapt, rebuild, and strive forward. America learned that leadership isn't about control. It's about empowering others to stand on their own. Together, these nations created a model of recovery that reshaped global politics and economics for generations. Yet, the decade between 1945 and 1955 wasn't free from tension. The Cold War was rising, and the line between freedom and fear was being drawn across Europe. Germany itself became the heart of this divide, East and West, split by ideology but united in memory. The contrast was stark. In the West, the flame of democracy burned brighter each year. In the East, that flame was shadowed by control. Still, the progress of the West stood as living proof that freedom could rebuild faster and stronger than oppression ever could. The reconstruction of the end of World War II marked more than just the conclusion of a conflict. It marked the beginning of a transformation that would define the modern world. In 1945, Germany was not merely defeated. It was dismantled, devastated, and divided. Entire cities were leveled, infrastructure was destroyed, and the people were left with little more than memories of what once was. The nation's economy had collapsed, its political structure dissolved, and its moral identity was in question. Yet, as history has shown time and again, the end of one era often becomes the beginning of another. In the ruins of Germany, the seeds of renewal began to take root. The Allied forces stepped into a land of despair, confronted by starvation, homelessness, and chaos. Among these powers, the United States approached the situation not only as a military victor, but as a moral leader. America had learned from the mistakes of the past that punishing a defeated nation only breeds resentment and future conflict. This time, instead of imposing suffering, it chose to invest in rebuilding. The world would witness an act of vision, the Marshall Plan, one of the most ambitious and compassionate efforts in human history. Through the Marshall Plan, America provided economic assistance, resources, and structure to help rebuild Europe's shattered economies. For Germany, this plan meant more than just recovery. It meant redemption. The initiative helped stabilize the currency, restore trade, and revive industries that had been destroyed by years of war. But the most powerful thing the Marshall Plan rebuilt was confidence, the belief that progress was still possible, even after total destruction. The people of Germany began to see that their nation could rise again, not through domination, but through dedication. Konrad Adenauer emerged as the guiding force behind this renewal. As West Germany's first chancellor, he understood that rebuilding the nation would require not just physical reconstruction, but moral reawakening. He worked alongside the Americans to establish democratic principles, reform the economy, and restore Germany's credibility on the world stage. Under his leadership, Germany embraced a new identity, one defined by discipline, democracy, and diligence. The scars of war were deep, but the spirit to rebuild ran deeper. Across the Atlantic, America was also reconstructing itself in the post-war era. Millions of veterans returned home, ready to trade their uniforms for new beginnings. The GI Bill opened doors for education, home ownership, and opportunity, transforming America into a symbol of prosperity and possibility. Factories shifted from producing weapons to producing tools of progress. Automobiles, appliances, and technology that would reshape everyday life. The United States not only rebuilt its economy, it redefined what was possible in a free society driven by innovation and hope. The collaboration between America and West Germany became one of the most defining partnerships in modern history. Through cooperation, trust, and shared values, the two nations built something stronger than alliances. They built a model for how enemies can become partners, how defeat can give birth to determination, and how destruction can evolve into development. Within a decade, Germany experienced the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, where factories roared to life, cities were reconstructed, and unemployment plummeted. The same streets that once echoed with the sounds of despair were now alive with ambition. But this progress came with challenges. Germany remained divided, East under Soviet control, and West aligned with the democratic world. The Cold War loomed large, and the ideological battle between freedom and communism intensified. Yet, the success of West Germany stood as undeniable proof that democracy and free enterprise could triumph even in the face of division. The reconstruction of Germany became a symbol of resilience. In the aftermath of World War II, the landscape of Europe was a portrait of devastation. Germany, once the symbol of industrial might, was reduced to ruins. The air was thick with the dust of collapsed buildings and the silence of loss. Millions were displaced, searching for food, shelter, and the faintest glimpse of hope. The war had stripped away not only Germany's infrastructure, but its spirit. Every city was a reminder of what hate and conflict could destroy. Yet beneath the rubble, a quiet determination began to grow. A belief that even the most shattered nation could be rebuilt through courage, unity, and vision. In those first uncertain years, Germany was divided into 4 zones, each controlled by one of the Allied powers. The Western zones, guided by the United States, Britain, and France, looked toward rebuilding and reform. The Soviet-controlled East focused on ideological reconstruction, imposing control through fear and rigidity. But in the West, under American leadership, the idea of reconstruction took on a new meaning, one grounded in cooperation, democracy, and economic freedom. America understood that the true victory after war was not in punishment, but in rebuilding trust and stability. The Marshall Plan became the embodiment of this philosophy. It was more than an economic program. It was a lifeline. Billions of dollars flowed into Europe, providing food, machinery, and raw materials to jumpstart recovery. For Germany, it meant the revival of its industries and the rebirth of its economy. Factories began to reopen, workers returned to their jobs, and families who had known only scarcity began to dream again. The American approach was clear: empower people to rebuild their own future rather than dictate it for them. This vision created a foundation for peace stronger than any treaty. At the center of Germany's recovery stood Konrad Adenauer, a leader of conviction and wisdom. As Chancellor of West Germany, he worked tirelessly to restore stability and moral confidence. With American partnership, he steered the nation toward democracy and aligned it with the Western world. His leadership, coupled with the resilience of the German people, gave birth to a new national identity, one defined not by conquest, but by creativity, not by domination, but by discipline. The lessons of the past became the fuel for progress. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America was transforming in its own way. The post-war years were marked by optimism and innovation. The GI Bill empowered millions of veterans to gain education, buy homes, and start businesses. Suburban neighborhoods grew, industries expanded, and the American dream became a symbol of renewal. This period of prosperity was not confined within American borders. It extended outward, inspiring allies and setting an example for rebuilding nations. The United States had proven that progress was possible when opportunity met determination, and it sought to extend that same belief to the world it had helped liberate. In Germany, recovery evolved into what would later be called the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. Within a decade, the country that had been reduced to ashes became one of the strongest economies in Europe. German workers poured their energy into production, driven by purpose and pride. Streets once filled with ruin now bustled with life. Factories roared with progress, exports increased, and optimism spread through every corner of society. The partnership between America and West Germany stood as a beacon to the world, proof that cooperation and compassion could achieve what violence never could. But beyond the economics, this era represented something deeper: the rebirth of humanity's faith in itself. The collaboration between former enemies revealed that even after unimaginable destruction, nations could find common ground. The United States and Germany demonstrated that rebuilding was not just a physical process, but a moral one. The story of post-war Germany and American Reconstruction is a timeless reminder that even the deepest scars can give birth to the greatest strength. It proves that destruction does not define destiny. Decisions do. When America chose rebuilding over revenge, it changed the course of history. When Germany chose discipline over despair, it rebuilt its identity from ashes. Together, they demonstrated that cooperation is more powerful than conflict, and that unity can turn enemies into allies. The decade from 1945 to 1955 was not just a period of recovery. It was a rebirth of humanity's faith in progress, proof that peace is not given. It is built, brick by brick, through courage, vision, and hope.